Well, I guess it is time to see what this behemoth can do. The villain is a very interesting versatile solo ship. Some would say it might be the best, although DPS wise I believe the Vazago still has a bit more advantage. I believe that they have tampered with the stats on these ships, or I might have messed up the skill per level bonuses on these ships. In any case, we will find out about that very soon. Now, the villain has received the same treatment as the previous versatile solo ships. Basically, it has received the same roll bonus, and overall it has received another extra medium slot, which in this case for this ship wasn't really as important as on the Astarte, but you know, a extra medium slot is always nice, so I'm not going to complain about that. But overall, the villain has a very nice bonus on lightweight ship turret damage, but the bonus on lightweight ship rocket damage has been, well, I would say reduced, or I might have messed up the numbers in the first place. I thought that it was 10% on both, but apparently it's 10 for turrets and 10.5% on missiles, which I would say kind of makes sense since Serpentis ships use turrets primarily. Now it has 2 frigate slots, 1 destroyer slot, 5 medium slots, 8 low slots, 3 combat and 3 engineering rigs. The villain is primarily a armor tank, has a bonus on armor plates and, you know, things like that, which can be attributed to armor. So a shield tank is not going to work well on this thing. Now, let me quickly go and take a look at the ships here, because I was 100% certain that we had 2 of these ships with the same 10% bonus on turrets and missiles. But from what I'm seeing here, only the Vazago has that bonus. I don't know. Could be that they changed the stats, or could be that I just messed up numbers. In any case, I'm glad that that little misunderstanding was cleared out here. So right now the Vazago seems to have the best DPS potential, since it has the equal bonus on turrets and missiles for the lightweight ships, which is interesting. Makes the Vazago the top DPS in this case. Now, the implant that I'll be using, it is the Aerospace tactic implant. Now, someone mentioned that the effect is passive. One thing that I may have you know, forgot to mention. The effect is passive, but you also have the active modes that you can use, and I actually like to use them on fighters, on sentry drones, and on classic drones, because you know the effect is nice, and it does make the fighters work in a very interesting way. Also, would say it's kind of risky to use it besides on sentry drones, because speed is reduced, but the extra range, it has that certain feel to it that I like. It's a very odd implant in that perspective. But yeah, as someone mentioned before, if you are in a carrier, then you don't have to use the active mode. You can just use the passive effect, but you can also use the active mode if you like, but you have to be careful not to get caught with the implant active, since the fighters will be significantly slower. Although kind of weird, because the sentries have like no velocity, they're stationary. It has still that speed reduction, which is weird, since 90% reduction on 0 is still 0. In any case, here you can take a look at the stats of the lightweight fighters, of the lightweight destroyers. Now the DPS with this combination here is exactly the same DPS that you will see on the Vazago, and I'll actually show you that. But first, I just have to show you all the rigs and modules, and also the hangar bay. Now I'll return to the hangar bay in a moment. There's something quite hilarious that I want to talk about from what I've seen. But first I need to jump in the Visago just to show that the DPS on these ships is the same with the current build. But if we were to use bombers, then the Visago would have higher DPS than the villain because it would have a higher bonus on missiles, which is interesting. The bombers have their certain place and the frigates also have a certain place. So the stars aren't really everything when it comes to these ships, but I like to use them because they have a very nice applied DPS. And of course, let me just quickly pull out the fuel that I'll have to use. This time I'm coming prepared. Last time I completely forgot about the fuel on my ships. It took me like 30 minutes to find where I placed my fuel. In any case, the DPS with this current layout and with the current lightweight ships and with my current rigs and everything is exactly the same on both the villain and on the Visago. But if I were to use missiles or torpedo, if I were to use missile destroyers or bombers, then the Visago would have higher DPS. Now, someone was very angry last time because I was using the hangar, the tier 4 hangar bay, which is available by the way. You can build it and you can use it. It's expensive, yes, but it has its purpose. Now, the highest paper DPS is not on the destroyers. The highest paper DPS is achievable with the cheapest hangar bay, with the bombers. Bombers have much higher paper DPS than the destroyer fleet that I'm using here. However, as we have seen last time, and in the last two videos with the CN and with the Visago, paper DPS isn't everything. I am mostly focusing on applied DPS and the DPS that the ship is actually doing. And for the applied DPS, the destroyers are currently, I would say, really good. It used to be the other way around before they added the new skills and the new stuff. The bombers and the frigates were much better than the destroyers, but now the destroyers seem to be performing a little bit better than the bombers. Although bombers have their certain place against certain ships, they're still very good. 24.2 thousand DPS on the villain, which honestly is really good. Now with the bombers, I would still have higher DPS despite having a lower bonus on damage, since bombers do more damage by default. It should be about 29 to 32,000 DPS with the bombers. But bombers will not apply that damage to small targets, but they will apply that damage to large targets. So the destroyer fleet, the destroyer layout is good for sub-capitals, in some cases against capitals, and some battleships. Basically, they're good against any type of sub-capital combat. Meanwhile, the bombers are good to be used against battleships and above. So both have their specific use. Now, I just want to show you the CNC carrier DPS, but with normal fighters, since I wasn't able to spawn the offense lightweight ships. I will have to, just for comparison, I will have to use the normal ones, just to show you the DPS differences between lightweight ships and fighters. They're generally speaking very similar, although the lightweight ships, depending on the layout that you have, depending on the hangar bay that you install on your ship, it might be a bit lower, it might be a bit higher. So the DPS on the versatile solo ship is varying a bit more than the DPS on the CNC carrier. Of course, when it comes to price, both of these ships, or all of the carriers, faction carriers, are expensive. So I can just say, oh, this is cheap or this is not cheap. They're all expensive. Let's be real here. All of these monsters are expensive. Although I would say when it comes to what's the cheapest out of the expensive ones, well, I would say probably the CN carrier, because it's like 30 billion. Meanwhile, the faction carrier is like, well, this is technically a faction carrier, but it is cheaper than the rest. The other ones like 50 to 100 billion. And of course you have to get the hangar bay for it. And of course you have to get lightweight ships, which might be a bit more expensive than the normal fighters. So Overall, the cost price is definitely in the favor of the CN carrier. Surprisingly, shockingly, never thought that I'd say that, but yeah, the CN carrier is actually the cheapest faction carrier right now. Should be, depending on the equipment and depending on what you want to do with it, of course. But yeah, and of course, I have a nanocore, weird nanocore for this thing. One very important key factor, that's increase the DPS by 34%. So if the DPS is, kind of weird on this thing, it's because of the nanocore primarily. But the CN carrier is also known to have some good DPS by default, so it is a very popular ship. Players love it. Everyone basically loves this thing, despite it's having a very odd look. A lot of players are not really a fan of how it looks, but they're a fan of how it performs, and I can kind of see why that's the case. I mean, I'm personally not really a fan of the design of this ship, but I can live with it. It looks nice, but I would still do something a bit different, and I've heard rumors that the developers will change the appearance of this ship down the road. Kinda excited to see how that goes. 19,552.67 DPS with my current layout. Now the DPS can go up and down depending on the fighters that you use. The fighters have high DPS, and with the special mode active, 20,000 DPS, which is very similar to the DPS that we see on the versatile assault ships. It is close, but a little bit lower, and of course not the end DPS, not the highest DPS possible. With the Galactic fighters it would be very similar, but I use different lighter ships on the versatile assault ships, so just to have a fair comparison I used different types of fighters on the CNC carrier, so that the different ships have the same effect. Okay, now back to the villain. I almost got completely sidetracked by the other ships. So how is this thing performing in combat? Well, we will be finding out. We'll find out that very soon. So let's go and let's see how does this DPS apply to a navy battleship. Now I'm taking a navy battleship, a tanky one, because navies are used in hunting capital ships. They're basically being used to tackle or even to solo a PvE carrier. Now this carrier that I'm currently flying here is not really built for PvP, it's the PvE build that is a popular way of... I mean, this build is quite popular, been used for years now, I guess. It is mostly glass, it's focused on DPS, and it has the destroyer lightweight ship fleet. So it has about 24,000 DPS, and this navy here is a brick tank. It's super chunk. It is chunked to hell, as usual. My classic build. I mean, if there's anything that I'm known for, it's the chunk, it's the bricks. I built some crazy bricks, and I'm still doing that. Although this Raven Navy has fantastic passive shield regeneration. It is good. It can actually tank a battleship passively. Already tested out, and it works really well, surprisingly. But it's probably not going to be able to tank a carrier passively. For a carrier, you need an active tank. 1 million hit points without the damage control active. Well, the damage control is now on cooldown. With the damage control, it's about 3.8 or 4.8 million hit points for 30 seconds, which honestly is pretty good. But as you can see, even with this enormous tank, I am able to just cut through this ship without a problem. And this is a versatile solo ship. They're a bit more tanky than the ordinary carriers, so a solo navy is going to have a rough time to shoot down a PvE versatile solo ship, if they are not AFK, of course. So yeah, it didn't take long to actually burn down that navy. I'm kind of surprised by that DPS. That's a very good tank, and still was able to cut through it without much of a problem. Now, let's do something. Well, let's go and eat a anaconda at the villain. Now, I usually say that a very good tank is going to beat a very high DPS ship, and in most cases, that is the case. That's just how it goes. It's just the natural order of things in the game. Now, this anaconda doesn't have any tank rigs, because I was curious to see if a base resistance anaconda can actually withstand a full glass villain with the stores. Now in this case, as I mentioned in the start of the video, against ships that are above the class of a battleship, the bomber fleet would do much better because they would have more DPS, and since this thing is huge, I mean it's a carrier, the bombers will apply most of their DPS. So against other capitals and against battleships, the bomber fleet would do much better, and your DPS output would definitely be significantly improved. I mean, I already tested this out like 20 times in the past against a variety of ships. I made maybe 50 videos for the versatile assault ships. I tested everything out that's possible with these things, so I'm well aware of what they can do, what they can't do. I'm well aware of all the different weapon types and fighters that they can use, and I'm well aware of what the lightweight ships are capable of. They're really good. They used to be, I mean, these things used to be very weird back in the day, before the new skills and before everything that's been added recently. These ships were tanks mostly. Their DPS wasn't that impressive, but now with the new skills, implants, modules, damage mods, everything that included, and some buffs of course, they became formidable and very, very scary opponents. Now, something very interesting is happening here. The anaconda is actually, I want to say that it's struggling to tank, but I feel like I'm slowly breaking the tank of the anaconda. And as you can see, the anaconda has fantastic tank, but its DPS isn't that impressive. So it is going to take a bit longer to go through the shield of the villain, but at the same time, the villain has fantastic DPS, but its tank is practically non-existent. It has some I mean, it's a versatile assault ship. They're tanky by default, but it's still a DPS fit, and the tank, while being good, it can be better, and in my standards this is a bad tank. In my standards when it comes to tanking are a bit different, so don't be surprised by that. But the tank on the villain, surprisingly in this case, is showing, I mean, 9000 DPS. You can tank that easily with a carrier. So in this case, the anaconda might actually be in trouble, because the anaconda has only one capacitor battery. It's a resistance tank, although it has some, I mean, the tank on it's pretty good, pretty solid, so I can't really complain about that. It has no shield rigs, so it can only be better if I add rigs, but I just wanted to see if it can tank without any rigs. Now, at first, you can see that it's, the damage is definitely not that bad. That's on the Anaconda's shield. However, the main problem with that ship is the capacity, and surprisingly, maybe the same problem is going to occur on the villain, since the villain has also only one capacity battery. The only difference is the villain's armor repairs will consume much less capacity, so they are going to be much easier on the cap on the ship, and it's not going to lose capacity as quickly as the Anaconda with the shield booster. Although at the same time, I believe the Anaconda has one of the best capacitors, so it's kind of even when it comes to the capacitor performance on both these ships. I actually have to double check the capacitor, the base capacitor stats, because I think the Villain or the Anaconda, both of them have like the best capacitor out of any versatile assault ship right now. The Vazago has the lowest, and the which one of versatile assault ship did I forget? Villain, Anaconda, Vazago. What's the fourth one? Oh my god, I forgot the fourth one. Well, that's what happens when you record at 4 AM. There is 4 of them, and I forgot the last versatile assault ship's name. Oh well. Happens, I guess. That poor ship, I forgot its name. Angel is the Vazago. Serpentis is the villain. Good stuff. Astarte. How could I forget that? How could I forget my favorite faction ship in the game? Maybe I'm getting old. Maybe I am getting old. That's a fact. That's a fact. Anyway, let's go back to the little combat here. I mean, it does good damage, honestly. If I had the bombers, it would shred that thing. So yeah, if you want the best like sustained and applied DPS to all ships, including capitals, subcapitals, then the fighters, then the destroyer lightweight ships is the way to go. Now it doesn't have to be this one. 3 destroyers can get the job. That doesn't have to be the tier 4 rig. I had the tier 4 rig just because I was very curious to see how it would work. 3 destroyers and 1 bomber or 1 frigate is the optimal combo, I would say. But you can also use this combination. I know a lot of ships that have this combination. I know a lot of players who have this exact combination, by the way. So yeah, it's very interesting. The best paper DPS goes to bombers, and the best paper DPS and applied DPS on capitals and battleships is also going to bombers. So overall, as I mentioned before, they all have a very interesting use and purpose. Now, how is this thing going to perform in PvE? I would say, based on the performance of the Vazago, I would say it's going to do the same. I mean, it's the same DPS, it's the same lightweight ships, and overall the stats seem to be also the same. Maybe the optimal range might be a bit different, and maybe the optimal range will play a key role. Although, with the implant being active, it kind of solves the optimal range, since the implant enhances the optimal range of your lightweight ships. Now, this implant, while I see that it's not really obviously, I mean, it's not as practical with drones and fighters as it is with sentry drones. It makes sense. After all, it has reduced the speed, but it does work really well at basically sending your fighters in a blob of enemy ships, and they don't move much, but the enemy ships are all within your range, and that extended range might actually just help you clear everything a bit faster, since the fighters will start hitting properly at longer distances. And I mean, there's still a lot of things to play around with the implant, obviously, but I honestly do like how it works. It's interesting. I definitely enjoy this very weird way of, I mean, I call it weird because I never really expected that you can kind of pull off close range brawl sentry lightweight ships and fighters. That is something that I've never seen so far in this game, and it's a new thing. Kind of saves you the time. I mean, saves you time at clearing everything, because you can just drop the fighters and just keep clearing the mission or the anomaly. And of course, it clears faster since they have a longer range. They can kind of hit up to 60 kilometers with the current setup, I believe. And of course, the extra recovery range is also interesting. Obviously, also kind of made for sentries, because you have to be close to the sentries in order to pull them back. Well, surprisingly, with the lightweight ships, it also seems to be working really well for the same purpose. So, definitely a very odd way of using these ships and these fighters. Would it be good for PvP? No. When I say PvP, the PvP that you should be careful around with these ships is tackle. It all starts with a tackle ship. Tackle bomber, tackle interceptor, nasty stuff like that. And you definitely do not want to be caught with the implant active if one of these ships come in. Although, if I were to be honest, in reality, if there is a red neutral anywhere within 30 minutes of your ship, you should already be docked, because if there is hostiles nearby, just dock. Don't risk a ship. Can't believe that I have to say that after 4 years of the game. That should be,
enemy ships detected.
Should just be natural. Just if there is a hostile, just dock the expensive ship. I don't know how many dead alliance carriers I've seen lately. I've seen a lot, I think, and they all died. Like, these ships all died the same way, basically. They didn't dock when red was like 30 jumps away from them. When hostiles are spotted, they just keep on ranting, like, nothing will probably happen to the ship. Yeah, famous last words. I've seen it. I've been around dead carriers. I know how things work. And if there is a hostile, like 30 jumps from my ship is getting in the station, because they're just, not worth the risk in the ship. I mean, depends, I guess. If you can't kill it, well, I mean, go for it. But when there is one interceptor, there is a whole lot more ships behind it. So in the end, the best thing is you just dock if there's hostiles nearby. Especially if you're flying something expensive. I mean, a single carrier like a normal carrier, yeah, it's not that bad, I guess. A loss of a normal capital, it's not that bad. But a faction carrier, a CN carrier, that's just, that loss may will stick with you. No matter how many ships you kill, you still will have that 600 billion trillion loss mail, and yeah, they sting. So
enemy ships detected.
Just the best thing is just dock the expensive ships when hostiles are nearby.
We're under attack.
Speaking from the experience from seeing all of these ships getting blown up on a daily basis, almost. Actually, not all the time, but there are days where it's pretty wild. So yeah. Now back to the villain here. So as you can see, this thing, I mean, it's clearing everything very quickly, as expected. Now the thing that this thing has over the Visago are webs. The webs are definitely helping a lot at hitting the target properly. I mean, the tracking on these lightweight destroyers is really good, but the webs can really help in some cases. After all, Serpentis webs are really strong, one of the strongest, if not the strongest webs in the game, and the webs slow down 91.5% per web on the villain. So basically, with 2 or even 3 webs, the targeted ship is basically completely immobile. They are not going to be able to move anywhere. So that alone makes the villain a very interesting choice for that purpose, because if it just happens that there's a tackle ship nearby, webs can be really good at slowing them down for the lightweight ships to kill them. So the villain has some advantages over the Vizago when it comes to webs and some electronic warfare stuff. It also has long range points. It can catch target from 45 kilometers, which is really good. And the lightweight ships are also not that slow, so the villain does have its purpose. And it's definitely no bad ship. The Vizago, being an angel ship, has its own advantage. Speed, DPS, can use bombers more effectively, you know, things like that. So in the end, it really comes down to what you really like to fly, what ships you like to fly, what faction you like to fly. I usually say go with the ship that you like the most. My job here is to show you all the different ships that we have in the game, and also my job is to show you builds that work and to give you ideas on how to build your own ship. That was my goal, still is my goal, and will remain my goal. And also, I want to help as many players as possible to explain how things work, at least with these ships. And I mean, the fighters just shred. I mean, there's no denying it. These fighters, I call them fighters. They're kind of fighters, but they're not fighters. They're lightweight ships. Funny enough, the lightweight ships have crew members, by the way. They're still ships after all, operated by crew. So I mean, it's a very interesting mechanic, and you can expect at one point the super carriers, the versatile assault super ships, to be able to wield lightweight battlecruisers and battleships. I personally think that's going to be pretty interesting, and I'll be testing that out as well, since I believe that would be pretty hilarious to see how it would work. Maybe not exactly battleships, lightweight battleships, but you know, anything is possible. We have a certain pattern that we can follow. We have normal carriers, and faction carriers are special carriers, versatile assault ships. The faction super carriers will also be something special, and no idea when and how they'll be released, but you know, I can almost guarantee you that they will make their way to the game at one point. And well, with that being said, that was the villain, and this was a very quick laboratory mission. I mean, this thing is just insane. Very happy with the performance of the villain, and this ship has its own charm. I would say it's a very interesting ship to fly, and if you want to get one, well,
warp drive
definitely
active.
From what I've seen here and from the various different tests that I've done on these ships, they're definitely now worth getting if you want to fly something special and interesting. Alright, well, with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed. If you would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, fly safe, and as always, I'll see you next time.